Hello. Let me know if y'all can hear me so we can begin. Okay. All right. So sorry about Wednesday. I was doing something, building something, and I only had a little while to have the table saw, so didn't want to, wasn't able to do the SoDA stuff. So sorry about that. So because of that, we're not gonna be able to get into animations in this week. So we'll be doing animations uh probably next week. We'll be touching on it once we start getting like once we actually start building our stuff. I want to show you how to do some animations with SVG. That way we can make our websites, kind of pop. So that should be interesting. Also, for those that are wondering, next week we finally start React. So that's going to be fun. So if you've been like dying and waiting these past, like 2 weeks or whatever, we'll finally start doing React next week. So yeah, make sure you're here on Monday, and we will start wrapping things up pretty fast. Again, I am like like speed running through a lot of these topics because I'm not trying to get into like the nitty gritty of things. That's not what these first few weeks is going to be about. The first few weeks is just me kind of like exposing you to some stuff because we're going to dive deeper into these things later. Okay? Um, this way I can show you why you need to do things a certain way or why you should think about things a certain way. So that's going to dive deeper into the HTML. We're going to be doing some advanced JavaScript, like, um, you know, right now I showed you some like very baby stuff for JavaScript, very simple stuff. A lot of it's probably not even that impressive. You probably think it's kind of boring, and you're right. Yeah, it is a little boring in the beginning. Uh, but once we start doing React, that's where I'm going to show you a lot of advanced things that you can do with JavaScript because it's where we're going to really need it. And it's just going to like, oh, and it's going to blow you away. Okay. So hang in there. Next week starts and it's going to get a lot harder. Um, like way harder. So please don't miss next week. It's going to be really, really fun. And a lot of the JavaScript that we're going to be learning, basically we have the next 2 months to just learn JavaScript. We're just going to become masters of JavaScript. So right now, very, very, baby steps. But it's going to start exponentially growing. By the end of this whole thing, you're going to be like a JavaScript ninja. Okay. All right. So today we're going to finish up our CSS stuff that we were doing here. Again, super basic, just kind of, showing you some stuff because today we're going to be starting very basic stuff with Tailwind. Okay, so that's going to be really, really fun. I love Tailwind. I'm a big proponent of Tailwind. So yeah, learn how to use Tailwind. That's what we're going to do today. Okay, and it's going to be pretty sick. All right. So I think this was the last slide that we had ended on was the cascading order. And so I want to go through this real quick because because this actually is going to matter a whole lot now because we are going to start playing with Tailwind. And Tailwind uh lives kind of like um actually I don't have it here. That's actually a big mistake. I need to have it. What we call inline, so classes and stuff like that. So um we're going to talk about that basically like right now. And we're going to try and figure out where does Tailwind fit in this cascading order. Okay, is it inline? Is it internal? Is it external? Where does it live? Okay, so to answer that question, first we need to go through each one of these one at a time. Okay, so first let's write some CSS. Okay, So again, remember, in order for us to start our CSS stuff, or our website, we need to use live server. So I'm going to right click on index.html and open this up with live server. And there we go. That's our really boring website, but it gets the job done. All right. Now let's style this stuff. Let's style this using CSS, but let's move our CSS code to an external file. So let's do that number 1. Okay? Now, you can call this whatever you want. You can call it tuna.css, apple.css, it doesn't matter. By convention, however, at least depending on what framework you're using, there's always a special name we like to give it. If you're just using vanilla HTML and you just have one style sheet, or you compile something to one style sheet, you sometimes call it main.css, or you call it styles.css. When we use React, they like to call it global.css. Okay, it really doesn't matter. I'm just gonna go with styles.css because that to me makes a lot of sense, right? So I'm just gonna go with style.css. All right, that's it. That's all I'm calling it. Nothing crazy. Okay, that's it. All right. Now, we need to link these two files together. Okay, we need to link them. Now, how do we do that? Well, notice how I use the keyword link. So, in the head tag, okay, in the head tag, we were going to use another tag. This is called the link. Okay, and we do an href. Okay, this is basically like where we can where we grab the CSS file, or file, any file. In this case, I'm gonna grab styles.css. There it is. Okay. Now, a link is what's called a self-enclosing tag, just like BR and input. That is that there is no closing tag. Like let me probably blow this up a little bit. Okay, so H2s and the H1s, again, we've gone over this a little bit. These have closing tags, meaning you have to close it like this, because what you put in between them is going to be, it's usually more HTML that you have. It can have children. Content, we sometimes call it, just content, or children, whatever you want to call it. This style tag has a closing tag. The meta tags and the link tags do not have a closing tag. So you just close it using a /. In HTML5, you can kind of omit it, but I don't think that's clean. I like using the / before the right chevron, just to be explicit that this is a self-closing tag. That way I don't have to go hunting, oh, where's the closing tag? But there's really not a closing tag. So I just like to be a little bit more explicit. Again, you don't have to, but it's all about consistency. So I'm just going to use that. All right. Next, will this work if I just do that? Well, let's see. I'm gonna delete all these styles. Okay, delete all the styles. All the styles are gone. And I'm going to split my screen into 2, like so. Okay, so a couple ways we can check to see if this is working is just check the network tab. So we're gonna go here to the network, hit refresh. Is there any 404s? No. Okay, so I think we're okay. Okay, so let's go to styles and let's add a style. So I'm gonna say that the H1, I want the text, or I'm sorry, the color to be red. Save that. Okay, hit refresh. Something's not working here, right? So what seems to be the problem? Did I call it the same thing? Yes. Okay. So in order for this to work properly, we need to say, hey, this file is a something. There is a relationship between the index.html and the CSS file. And that is that this is a style sheet. Like that. Okay? Once we have the style sheet, you notice that it finally actually loads. If you don't do that, the browser, when it starts parsing through it, it will not load this link. It will not load this file at all. Okay. Now, styles.css, this may not be this might be a little confusing. You might sometimes see it with the forward slash in the front, like that. You see a forward slash. Okay. You can also do it where it's like, if you know where the domain's at, you know, in case we kind of do, it's HTTP : right? That's the protocol, // local host. Okay. And then we're on a specific port that is 5,500, // and that'll work too. You can see if I do a hard refresh here, it's fine. It's all fine. Okay. If I have the wrong thing, like let's say I do like this, meaning I'm assuming it's port 80 and I save, okay, well, now we have a little problem here. And then it says styles.css, you know, it failed. Okay. It failed. Click on that. It says, yo, I can't find it. You know, it's basically all it's saying. So, okay, cool. So again, now this only works if the file is in the same directory, okay, as your index.html. So if styles is in the same index, then we're good. It's fine. But sometimes you might be like, you know, I want to have my my styles in a special folder. Call it styles. You know, why not? And you want to move the styles into there. Okay, so now we just move the folder. That's totally fine, right? You can move your styles. You call it whatever. A lot of times people call it, you know, CSS, just to be a little bit more specific. So in my CSS folder, I'm going to have styles. Okay, not a problem. Okay, it's nice to be organized. Okay, so, and that's the case, then we need to go to our CSS folder, and in there we get styles.css. So you can just call it like this. That's fine. We'll hit save. There it's red. You could also use a // It's the same thing. Hit refresh, same thing. Sometimes people just omit the // That's totally fine. Either way, we're good to go. Now again, just to reiterate, if you try to put your CSS, you try to link your CSS to your HTML file, and you omit the rel attribute, that is the relationship that this file has to our HTML document, it will not load. Okay? Cool. All right, so now we have styles.css, which is an external CSS file out there. Okay, cool. Now that I have it linked, okay, that's our external. But now we also have this internal. We can also use styles, right? We can also have style here. We can have CSS embedded into our HTML file. That's another way of doing it. Okay, so I'm going to type an H1 in there. I'm going to say color to blue. Hit save. Now the color is blue. Okay. Now you might be thinking, well, is it because the style comes after the link? Well, let's move the link tag to after the styles. Okay, completely destroyed my spacing there. Hit save. And look at that. Right? So now it's red. Okay. So the question is, what is the best approach when handling CSS? Right? What's the best approach? And the best approach is usually when you link, so linking CSS, when you're linking CSS, you should always put your external files at the very top of your HTML file. So linking CSS, place to the top. Okay, so I'm going to grab these two lines and move it all the way to the top, like that. Okay, put it up as high as you can. Okay, meta tags, you can probably put those higher, but just put the links as far up as you can. Okay, and we hit save. Now the reason why is because if we look at our thing here, external style sheets should have lower priority than your internal ones. Now, why should you have it that way? Because a lot of times, okay, when you're linking your CSS files, okay, sometimes you're going to be linking them from somewhere else, okay? We call that a CDN, a content delivery network. It's basically a location that has the file, but lives somewhere else. It's not even on your server, it lives somewhere else. And we're going to show that, we're going to show an example of that with Tailwind. Now, you want to bring in these styles from the outside. However, sometimes you want to have the ability to override certain styles, right? Like let's say we were using a Google Styles.css, okay? So they're going to use like by default, they're going to use like Google Blue, Google Red, stuff like that. And that's totally fine. If you're just prototyping, totally fine. But then sometimes you want to override these colors. If you put the links too far below, then they're always going to take priority. So by you pushing them up, you move them down in the priority list. And so your styles here for this particular file, you can override those styles. Okay, so because remember, CSS cascades, so order here matters. Okay, but this is generally how you want your styling order to go. External, dead last. Internals, well, they can fight each other. And then inline. Okay. Cool. So let's look at what we have now. We have a style that's in a separate file. Specifically, here's my index.html. My index.html is linking the CSS folder and then the styles.css. That's what's happening in here. Okay, that's how we're linking it. Okay. We then have our style tag right after. Right, again, the style tag is in the head. We put the style tag right there. Okay. Effectively, what we did here was we overrode this rule. Now, will it work if I put in H1 but I target a different attribute, like a different property? Like, will it still be blue or will it turn black? Because H1's quote unquote overriding it. Do you guys remember? So what would happen if I did something like this? Font, weight, and then I did like bold. Will it be blue and bold, or will it be bold and have the default black text color? Which one is it? Bold and blue or bold and black? What do you guys think? Because remember, this one's targeting the element H1, but this one's also targeting the element H1. So who wins? Okay, so 3D says it's going to be black and bold. All right, so let's save. Okay. And so it's actually just the red. H1 has it red. Okay. And then it's, well, technically it's already bold. So actually, maybe I should use, instead of bold, we'll say lighter. There you go. Okay. I forgot H tags are bold by default. Okay. So I just made it lighter. So the font weight, I made it thinner. So it's red and it's a different font weight. So essentially, these two rules combined, they fuse, kind of like, Dragon Ball Z fusion, fusion dance. You guys remember this? You guys remember that, yeah? Okay, this is what CSS is doing. It's getting this tag and this rule, so this rule, and it's fusing it. Okay, trunks is superior. So this rule and this rule fuse. They go like that, and they go like that. And then you get that. In this case, you get you just get them together, right? That's about it. Fusion, ha! Yeah, exactly. Okay. Then you get gotenks, right? Then you get gotenks. Okay. Unless they fuse incorrectly, right? And then he becomes like the bigger version. It's all slow. Okay, cool. So, okay, great. So if we just want to, change one property okay, it won't override the entire thing. Okay, so they fuse. So that's good. That's a good example right there. Okay, so they fuse. Nice. Okay, so targeting the H1. Now again, I talked about that we can also do styles in here. So I can change the let's say color. I'm gonna change it. I want to change it here. I want to change this specific H1. You can imagine, let's say we had a bunch of different elements. Okay, but this very specific H1, I want it to be blue. So what happens? In this style, I'm basically doing CSS inline, like this is why it's called inline styling. But is it going to be blue and thin or blue and the default bold? Basically, is it deleting the previous styles, the previous rules that came up? You know, who wins? Is it a fusion again? Are they combining? Or is one completely overriding the other? What do you guys think? Are they going to fuse, combine, or are they going to completely override? So essentially, it's just going to be bold and blue, or bold and thin, or blue and thin. So blue and bold, blue and thin. Which one? What do you guys think? Blue and light. Okay. 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 So let's hit save here. So it's blue and light. Okay. So they fused. They fused. Okay. So let's change something else. So H1, this rule was changing the color. This one was changing the font weight, and then this one changed the color. So as we can see, if two rules, or if multiple rules are targeting the same element, H1, and they're also targeting the same property, the inline wins. See? If I were to also change it here, color, and change this to, I don't know, purple, okay? So changing the color and the weight. Purple does not win. Inline wins because I changed it right here. However, if I were to remove this, between styles and the styles file, coloring it red, and this one coloring it purple, purple wins. Okay, it's purple. Purple wins because styles came after the link and style takes precedence over link. Okay, cool. All right. So what's really cool is that we can have a style in this file. We can override a very specific property, right? That's targeting the same element. So in this case, I'm gonna change the font weight. And then inline, we can also fuse another thing. So we can say, what's called font style. Let's make it italic. So now it's going to be red, thin, and italic. Boom. So 3 different places, three fusions, right? Very cool. All right. What if? Okay. All right. Actually, can't say the what if because you don't know yet. Okay. So in CSS, this is targeting what we call elements. So this is an element rule. Okay, so this is targeting all elements that happen to be in your document that are H1. Okay. Okay. But now this is very, very hard, right? Because what if I wanted H2 to also be italic? What if I wanted H1, H2 and H1 to both be italic? How can I solve this problem? Well, let's do another H2 clone or something. I don't know. So there's 2 H2s. Okay, there's 2 H2s. Now, what if I just wanted H2 heading to be italic? Okay. If I say, okay, well, let's do this. Let's say all H2s. Okay. Let's change the font style. Let's make it italic. Now they're both italic. Well, that's a problem. Are comments are written? Yes, they are different because they're different languages, so they're actually different. So in HTML, we write comments like this. In CSS, we write comments like that. And then in JavaScript, we write comments using forward slashes or the /*. I know. I know. All right. So here we created a rule which targets all H2s, all willy-nilly, and now they're all italic. But I said I want H2 heading to be the only one that's italic. So that is H2 clone should not be italic. So what can I do? Well, one way I can do is I can say, okay, in this style, I'm going to change the font style to normal. Okay, so that solves it. H2 heading is italic, H2 clone is no longer italic. But this is not scalable, right? This is absolutely not scalable, and this is going to be a nightmare, okay, to do. Okay. You can see the problem here starts to get really, really nasty because, you know, let's say your boss says, hey, we want the H2s to be also, I don't know, have a background color of being blue for some reason, like that, but only H2s that immediately follow or that precede a P tag or something like that. Well, this H2 is closest to the P tag, so only this H2 should be should be blue, but and not this one. You see, this doesn't make sense. So how do we change that? Well, in code, you can be like, oh, okay, well, that's not a problem. I'll just change the background color, okay, to back to transparent. Okay, you're like, oh, that's solved. But you can see how this is going to continuously compound on itself. So this is not a good way to solve this problem. Okay? So what's another way we can solve this? Well, in CSS, we have something called classes. So the way you create a class, you just say dot and then call it whatever you want. So I'm gonna call it tuna. And then the tuna class, I can define whatever properties I want. So I can say font style, italic. Okay, cool. So I have font style, italic. So now what I can do is in my H1, in order for me to use this style, I don't use a style tag anymore. I'll remove that. Instead, there is an attribute called class. So here I can add the tuna class. So notice that here, when I'm writing it inside the HTML, I don't use a dot. That's only required for here. The dot differentiates tuna from being treated as an element. This is no longer an element. This is what we call a class rule. Okay. So those are element rules. So elements are like bodies, li, ul, p tags, divs, sections, stuff like that. Those are all these HTML elements, these tags. This is what those are. This is just a class. Okay, this is custom. You can call this whatever you want. Okay, call this whatever you want. So now this H1 is going to have the tuna class. If I save, it's still italic. Beautiful. Okay. Now I can just delete the H2, or I'll remove this property here, the font style italic. I'll remove that. And wait, what happened here? Tuna, font style italic, class. Oh, okay, yeah. My bad. Okay. So now these two are no longer italic, and I said I only want the H2 that immediately follows or precedes a p tag to have an italic. So now I can say, okay, well, if I want H2 to be italic, all I have to say is say tuna. And now H2 is italic. So let me remove this background color. It's very hard to see. Okay, so now H2 is italic. So now I can reuse this same class on multiple different elements. You see that? Okay, now obviously this is terrible naming convention to call it tuna. So let's rename this to, we'll call this italic. Or we can call it font dash italic. We're allowed to have hyphens. Tuna dash italic. Okay. Now I just have to change this one. Oh, I should say font. Font italic. I'll change this to font italic. I'll change this to font italic, and then we're done. Cool. So this makes more sense. So it says font italic. Beautiful. What we just created here is what's referred to in the industry as a utility. Because it does one particular job. We name it something that makes sense. And it's reusable only when you specify. So only in the places that I want to be italic, I make italic. Sweet. Can I use multiple classes on the same element? Well, that's a good question. So let's say you wanted the font to be thin. This font weight. So I can say, I can create a new class, font dash weight dash, call it light. And I'll target the property font weight, and I'll call this lighter. Okay. So now I'm going to remove these rules here, or I'll comment this out. Okay. So now H1 is no longer thin. So I can go to the H1. And the way I do this to add multiple classes is you separate them out using a single space. Okay. So as long as there's a white space in between the two class names, it'll work. So now I just say font, weight light, hit save. So now not only is it italic, but it's also thin. We made the font weight lighter. So now we can compound them. And now they're reusable. Beautiful. Okay. Now, the question is, who wins between classes and styles? So let's say here I want to change the font weight to something like bold. So here it's bold, and here I say light. So who wins? Well, let's save it. Actually, before I save, anybody want to take a guess? Will the style tag win over the class tag? Who wins between these two? Style or class? Who wins? So 3D thinks the style tag would win. All right, so if it turns bold, they're right. And they're right. So the style tag wins over the classes. So this is good to know. So when would something like this make sense? Well, let's say we create something called a headline. We create a special class called headline that should be placed on all the H1 tags that are acting like a headline. Yes, exactly. Round of applause for 3D. Yay. All right. So let's say there was like, a specific style that we want to apply to all the headlines that are part of our document. So like the New York Times, the Washington Post, these news articles, places, they all have a specific style guide. Headlines must be this big, it must be this color, it must be this style, etc., etc., etc. It has to be the same font family, whatever it is, Roboto or Comic Sans, whatever. Okay, they have certain rules. So instead of you having to write down these rules again and again and again, we can put it in a classification. That's why it's called a class. We'll classify it as a something, and then whenever we need those styles, we'll add it in there. So let's say the headlines, we have a headline, and it's going to be, let's say, a font style of italic. We want the font weight to be, let's say, I don't know, bold. We want the color to be, like, let's see, what's a good color? Midnight blue. Okay, cool. Hit save. Now, anywhere we have a headline ever, so I'm going to delete the styles. Whenever we need to say, yo, this element here is a headline, we just call it headline. Hit save, boom. See that? So now it's blue, it has this midnight blue, it's bold, and it's italic. That's my headline. Okay, and I can prove this to you is the case. So let's go to nyt.com. And I guarantee you, as we're looking at this, I want you to notice the repetitions here. Like, look at this, look at the title here, especially because it's a link, right? We have the titles, the headlines of these, you know, possible articles that we have here, right? They're all the same. They're all the same, okay? Or most of them are they're pretty close. Again, it depends on the context here. They might think, okay, this is like front page, the most front page thing, and then like you have like these aside documents. Okay, so let's dissect this a little bit. So let's right click here, go to inspect element. Okay, so let's do it again. Right click, inspect element, and it's going to target. On the right side, we get the very specific thing. So here it's an H3 tag. So in this H3 tag, we have this CSS and it has like this really weird tag name. So they're probably using something. I don't know. But notice here we have the span. It's called balanced headline. Kind of like what we created, right? We created a class called headline. They called theirs balanced headline, as if there was an unbalanced headline. I don't know what that means. Again, this is an internal thing. I don't know it because these are all rules that gets created by each organization. Okay, cool. So let's look at this one. This one and this one, they kind of look the same, at least to my eye. So let's right click here and let's see if there's any similarities. Oh, hey, look at that. There's a balanced headline again. Interesting, right? Interesting. Okay. So let's see if we can find the balanced headline tag here. Headline, can we find that? No, can I find it? Okay. So their CSS is probably going to be in here. Yeah. Oh man. All right, let's not go through this. They're doing some crazy stuff. All right, let's not touch that. But all right, so let's find another one where it looks like it could be a headline, but it looks kind of different. This one right here. This looks like a headline. She fell in the whatever. There's a balanced headline, but then they changed some of these. This style is actually different. It has some extra stuff. So from my guess, as I'm looking at this and have dissected this a little bit, it looks like this span has some basic stuff. Actually, how are they overwriting this? Oh, she fell. Oh, it's this one. Ah, it's not this one. It's this one. She fell nearly 2 miles. So there's this thing called a ghost. Maybe that's what this is. Ghost. So whatever this class has, this attribute. Okay, if I were to remove this, I wonder what happens. Okay, nothing really happened. So this thing is different. I don't know why. I can't see it. Position absolutely. Aria hidden true. Maybe 2 miles. She found me to now. Okay, I don't know why. This one's different than these ones, but it looks. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. Maybe they're even using the same class. By the way, you can use the square with the mouse to select the right thing going to spec. Yeah. Using this thingy right here. Yeah. But I want to see the Does it show the class names too? No. Well, yeah, it shows them. Wish I can move my mouse. You can actually see it there. You see this white box that pops up. If you look at the top left, it says span dot, and then those are the classes that are attached. You'll see them concatenated if it has more than one. Let's say class name 1 dot class name 2 dot blah 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 blah. I'm actually a little trumped here. I'm not sure why this is a different font than these ones, even though they're all balanced headline, unless I'm reading something wrong. Either way, don't matter. Oh, style 200 might be that. Anyways, doesn't matter. The point is, you saw an example where it has these things. See? CSS OEMRL2. I don't know. They name these things weird stuff. Doesn't matter. But if we go to something like, let's say, what's another place we can go to? Let's go to the developer.android.com. Okay. So go here. We can see here. See, this is actually a perfect example of stuff we can look at. So let's right click here. I want to see this. Okay. So here, this is a class of button. So this A is a class of button. So anything that has the button class is going to act like something. So let's see what happens if I right click here. So let's go to this outer element, this parent here. I think it's this one. Let's keep going higher in the chain. I think it's this one. Yeah, right here. Let's add the button class to this. See what happens. Hey, look at that. I turned into a button. Because it had certain rules and I had to follow those rules. Now I created this entire div is now button by me just adding the button class. See that? And what's cool is I don't have to reload the HTML page. I just change it on the fly, right? So what happens if we take this link that is a class of button and then we completely remove it? What does it look like by default? Well, there you go. Okay. And that's it. So, let's put this over there. Okay, cool. Does it do something when you click it? Oh, I'm sure it does. Yeah, I'm sure it does. It'll probably take you to that link. But the whole point of the CSS is just to look at the styles. All right, cool. Nice. So again, we have one called a headline. We can change the headline, and you know, if we had another article, H1, article 2 or something like that, right? So there's your article 2. It's red because this one's coloring it red. I can say class name, headline, boom. And now these two are the same. And notice I don't have to retype out all this stuff. It's just there. Right? Okay, so that's cool. Okay. So does anybody have any questions or is confused about how that works? How you can create classes to name things? Like a very popular thing is to have like a button class, right? Because there's different types of buttons we can have, right? So if we look at the material document here, we go to material IO, and then we go under components. This was the reference guide I had mentioned before. If I click on buttons, the material design says there's 3 types of buttons. There's a contain button, which if you can see, there's a shadow right there. There's a little shadow. And it has rounded corners here. Okay. And the text is uppercase. Okay. You also have the optional option of having an icon. Okay. But you have 3 different types of buttons. We can also have, this is what's called a contain or a solid button. This is an outline. So you notice when I hover, the background turns like a slight, you know, purple color. It's very light. And we also have just the text one. It's still rounded. The corners are still rounded, but there's no outline. So the difference between text and outline is that border. Okay. They're all buttons, but they just have one thing that's indifferent. That's different. Now notice that they all have uppercase text, so that's something that could share between them, right? So you can start to think, okay, what are the attributes that they all share, and then can we create a class that basically extends on top of that? And the answer is yes, yes, we totally can. So the class can be created inside an external style sheet file. Yeah, of course, absolutely, 100%. So let's say I call this styles.css, okay? And then I have a class here called button, where the background color is a solid blue. So let's say blue, okay? But obviously that's going to be very hard to read. So then the color should be contrast. So it should be like white or white smoke. That sounds pretty cool, okay? Next, we need to have a border radius. So we want the edges to be round, okay? So we can say we want it to be 50 pixels rounded, or let's start off something softer, 20 pixels rounded. Okay, cool. Let me get rid of this. Okay. So in this style sheet, I have a class called button that has these styles. Cool. So now I'm going to create a button called, and it says here, click me. Okay, there's the button. Now notice that the button has some default styles already, right? Depending on what browser and then what operating system you're using, the button could look different. Okay, so these are just the default styles that the operating system, more particularly the browser based off the operating system, is providing. Okay, if you look at this on your phone on an iOS, it could look different than on Android. Okay, now there's no real reason why I'm using a button, right? I could use anything, but it just makes sense that you would add a button class to a button. So I'm going to say class, button. Boom. The background is blue. And notice that the edges are very rounded. So we can probably even go like, let's do something softer, like 5 pixels. So, okay, it's a slight roundingness. Okay. And let's say I don't want a border. No border. Border, none. Border, gone. Cool. It's too tight, right? It's too tight. So let's add some padding. So padding on the top. So buttons must have a padding of 4 pixels on the top. So notice that there's padding there. We also need some padding on the bottom. So let's say 4 pixels as well. Cool. All right, there we go. Now, anywhere we ever need to have a button, we can create a class called button, and then bada bing, bada boom, right? We can have some default button styles anywhere we ever need a button. So we have this click me, okay? Then we have another button that says, I don't know, add friend if you had a friend button. It's like, oh man, those styles, so boring. Now we just be like, add the button, boom, done. Easy peasy. The styles are all in. It's all good, right? Look at that. Just a little bit of CSS. We're a long ways now, right? All right. Now, how do we get the text to be uppercase? Should we do something like click me, like hard code it? Should we hard code it like this? Add friend, That's obviously one way. That's one way of solving this problem. But, what's another way we can solve this problem? Because let's say that you got hired at a company like WordPress and you have zero control of the content that a content creator is going to write when they do their blog. So you say, hey, we think that the buttons should be all uppercase, at least the text, and the button should be uppercase. You have no control over that. You could be like, hey, can you make them uppercase? But what if somebody makes a mistake and, accidentally has it lowercase by accident, right? It's totally by accident. They're like, they were rushing one day and they're just like quickly typing it out. How can you fix this? One way you could do this is using JavaScript, right? That's totally possible, though I think that's overkill. Another way we can do this is just through CSS. CSS is our styling. Okay, so if we have a rule, right, that says, hey man, I want to do a text transform and I want them all to be uppercase. Done. I don't have to do any of this. Anybody can, put whatever they want. I can do all lowercasing. Click, add, friend, the me, whatever. It's always going to be uppercase. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. All right. So does that all make sense? Is this making sense? These classes and how they work? There is no like replacement. It's about, when you should use specific things. It, as a cop out, it totally 100% depends on what you're trying to work on. Now, one of the places that I would say you absolutely 100% should use classes is when you're creating a style guide for your project. So before you start doing any coding, especially that has to do with styles, you have to absolutely must, just to make things easier, follow a style guide. Now, in the beginning, I had mentioned material design. If you don't have a style guide, follow one that already exists. You can add your modifications here and there, sprinkle your custom styles that you want to do, but you should follow a style guide, 100%. Okay? Now there's many kinds of design guides. Material design has one. Apple has one. Okay? Everybody has one. Facebook has their own style guide. Okay? I suggest you use Material. I think Material looks like the nicest as far as being able to be legible and usable. I would use Material if you absolutely have no idea about any kind of style guides. Use this. If you're like, okay, my boss says he wants me or she wants me to work on a list. How should list look like? Well, let's click on this list. How should it be styled? Okay, well, there we go, right? What should be the different types of interactivity? Well, when you hover, it should look like that. When you click on it, it should look like that, right? So when I'm pressing and I'm holding and it's dark and I'm gonna let go, it's the same color as it highlighting. Now this one is selected, so it's going to be darker. And then when I move around, it's still selected, so it's like that color. There we go. Okay. And there's some configuration, so you can have an icon, or you can have an avatar, right? Like if you have a contact list. If you guys have an Android phone, this probably looks very familiar. It's because they use material design. So it's no kidding that this looks kind of like your Android phone. You can have an icon right here. Okay, this is a button. So after list text, there's an icon. You could also just have text, right? So I think if you use the file manager, I think on the side it'll tell you if it's a file or a folder, I think, something like that. So this is totally an option. Okay. Two-line list, so you have a title and some smaller text, Again, same thing. You shouldn't have an icon and an avatar. It's one or the other, right? Cool. Now you don't have to think. That's the beautiful thing. You don't have to think, right? That takes away too much time from your development process if you have to think about your style. Now, if you have an artist on your team, specifically if you have a designer, then you should tell your designer, hey, make sure you follow a style guide and let me know the style guide so I kind of know what to expect. And then you just follow it. If none of you guys know what you guys are doing, really, you guys are all beginners, then by all means use Material. Look for something that you're trying to add to your application and be like, how should this be styled? Bottom navigation, here we go. This is what it should look like. Okay, it even tells you why, right? And this, look at the scroll bar. It's so tiny. There is a plethora of examples and details as to why you should do it this way. Okay, they're not just telling you, hey, you should do it this way. They're telling you like some pros, some cons, and why you should do it. And there's the research, so you can go and read that stuff if you want, and then like how you can apply it to different things. Like when we say theming, we also do things about, branding, color branding. Oh, you work for Nike or Facebook and it's like a blue color. How can we add the blue into the app to make it feel like it's Facebook and not some other application? Okay. This is what I mean by you should follow a design guide if you don't have one, a style guide. Just follow material by default. It's a great place. Some very cool stuff. Switches is a big deal, right? A lot of people use these little switches. This is what they look like. How should they behave? Click on behavior. They should behave like the following. You should do like this and blah, 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 blah. Stuff like that. Okay? Beautiful. I love the card one. Okay, we're going to be building this card pretty soon. We're going to be building this. Okay? So nice. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense of how these classes work. You can totally override a class. Okay? Now, let's delete all of this. Or actually, I'll leave it like that. And I'll say, okay, so we have a button class. But let's say I wanted this button for whatever reason. You want to break the style guide. And you say, I want to make this italic. Can we do that? Sure, why not? Font italic, we keep all the other styles, but we just make it italic. Okay, very, very cool. So you can do it that way. You could also do it this way. Style, font, style, make it italic, hit save. Okay, same, you get the same thing. Okay. Now, what happens if you have two classes that clash? Right? What happens if you have two styles that clash? So here's a button. Okay, and I want to create another one. So, or something else. We'll call this text blue. The only thing that this tag does is it changes the color to this blue color. That's it. That's the only thing it does. Now you'll notice that this one is changing the color to be white and not blue. So if I were to use these two classes on my HTML element, they're both targeting the same thing. So at this point, you should be asking yourself, so who wins? So if I do here text dash blue, who wins? Blue, text blue, or button? Which one wins? Anybody have a guess? Yes, even in Flutter, I noticed the material design was very present. Yes, because Flutter is developed by Google. So there's no, there's no mistaking that they're going to have that. Now, I haven't used Flutter, but I imagine that in Flutter, they should have a way for you to switch the theming. I know you can obviously change the styles, but you should also be able to create your own styles as well through Flutter. So hopefully that's the case, and I think that's the case, but we'll see. I don't really like Flutter. I've seen it. I'm kind of hesitant of using it. It's just too pedantic, like not pedantic. It's too verbose. You have to just too much. Like I have to type too much. I don't like typing too much. Just to get something very, very simple done. I don't like doing it. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So Flutter probably does have a way of doing it. Okay, cool. So you're saying that text blue would win. The second class would be dominant? I like how you use that word, dominant. Okay, so let's save. So now we can't see it because the background is blue and the text is blue. Okay. However, what happens if I were to just change the order of things? So I do text blue first and then the button. Okay. Interesting. So I change these two. Okay, let me refresh. Okay, so it's not a problem with me, but button it's still blue. So even though I put text blue first, you know, button or button last, it's still blue and not white because this would have won. Now the reason is because of the order in which it came in the file. Text blue came later. So if I were to switch this, then it would be white. But because blue came after, it overrides. So the order in which you have it in the file is going to matter. This sucks. And that's when you have to revert to the style tag because that one wins. So what I'm saying is, again, remember what I told you in the very beginning? CSS is easy to learn. It's hard to master. Now you have to come up with rules and design specific rules saying that, hey, if you're going to hard code something very specific, be very careful of how you do it, right? Because if we're trying to overwrite it later with using a class, we may not be able to, and then we're screwed. Okay. Now, what happens if I were to move this text blue out and I move it into here, my style tag? Now who wins? Is it still blue? Well, let's say it's blue again, even though I changed the order of the classes. Why is that? Because again, the cascading order matters. External goes last, then internal styles, then inline. So all I did by moving it from here to here is that I actually gave it a higher precedence by moving it in here. So it actually get it, as 3D said, it got more dominant. So that's obviously not kind of what we wanted. So another option you can do is, let's say we had styles 2.css. Okay. If we link it, let's say, so yeah, styles 2, we'll paste it in here. Okay. We can link styles 2, but we have to link it before. So do a link, href, CSS, styles 2, rel, style sheet. Okay. Now I will delete this. And now button wins because button technically comes after this one because of the way we loaded it. First, we loaded styles 2, which says, hey, the color will be blue. But then we loaded styles.css, which says, hey, I'm going to change the color to be smoke white. And in the order in which we put it here, button is now after. So it doesn't matter which way we move it about because of the cascading order. Text blue is now lower precedence than button. So the only way we can change the color now is if we go to the style and we go color and we change this to blue. Because style will always have the highest precedence. Okay. It's, as 3D said, the most dominant. Okay, so hopefully that little exercise makes it clear, okay, of how that works. Now for the next half hour, I'm going to show you how to use Tailwind. What some cool utilities that we can use. So let's bring over Tailwind. Here we go. Now, what the heck is Tailwind? So Tailwind is called a utility-first CSS framework. Okay. Now, what that means is basically they went ahead and created a bunch of those CSS classes that we were playing with. We only created 2, button and whatever. And basically what those utility classes do is they target very specific properties. Okay? And it does it in such a way where it's kind of expected of you to use multiple utilities on a single element. So they can work in conjunction with one another and not fight one another. Okay? So you can see here that in this example that you probably saw in the little GIF, they were able to style this little card. This looks like a card to me, so I'm gonna call it a card. And they did it all without using any CSS. Well, that's a lie, right? Because they did, but they're using just the utilities that come with Tailwind. Tailwind has a lot of utilities that are already pre-built that are the most used. Like, when are you ever going to use a font size of 500 pixels? Probably never. So their utilities are only going to be like, they kind of narrow the styles that you can use on purpose. It's like, you're never going to really need this, so we're going to provide you with just this. Now you might be thinking, well, what if I want that thing that they don't provide? Well, that's great. Tailwind is incredibly customizable. You can customize it. So if there's colors or specific styles that they don't have, you can override it. You can add more. You can extend it. So all we have to do is click on Get Started. And there's a couple of ways we can install this. So here we're going to click on Installation. So for right now, we're going to use the CDN. Now, the downside of using a CDN is that we cannot customize the Tailwind's default themes. So we cannot change the utility classes at all. We can't even add more. We can create our own, but they're technically not part of Tailwind. We want Tailwind to take care of it for us. And it's not as easy as, well, can we just create our classes in a separate style sheet? It's like, no, because Tailwind is built like in a way where it generates these styles for us. So we can't really do that. Okay, we're going to be using Tailwind when we start with React, but for now, let's use it using a CDN. So all I do is copy this. Now notice that this is just a link. The href lives over here. And notice what the very last thing you get is tailwind.min.css, and it's just a style sheet. Okay, so we're just getting the CSS. In fact, let's just go to this link first. So I'm going to say Control-C, copy. There's the CSS. Okay, now, believe it or not, this is on one line. This is on one line. There's no spacing. All the spacing has been stripped out. This is what's called minified. Every space is a character. Every character, depending on your encoding, is 1 byte. So all the spacing, any extra spacing is gone because that's wasted space. We want to try and serve the content as fast as possible to our users. So spacing has to be removed. And there you go. So you can see there's going to be no spacing. This is called minified CSS. That's why the name here has min. This is the minified version of it. So there is absolutely no spacing. That is on a single line, yes. And I will prove this to you once we have this. Actually, can I use Postman to show you? Or if I go like this, if I paste, don't do that. If I go to this file real quick, I can just download it and it'll just be all in one space. So where did I go to? Save as, and then we go to the desktop and just call this tailwind.min, hit save. Okay, and then we open the file. Okay. It's wrapping here, so view. Is there a way to word wrap? Is it? Oh no, not responding. No. Okay. Close the program. It died. It's a very big file. It's a very big file. Okay. Okay. But I promise you, it's on one line. This is one line. All right. Cool. Okay. So we go, here to increase this. So let's add our styles here. So I'm gonna delete these two, or you can add it if you want, just add on top. So there you go, Tailwind. There we go, we added it as a style sheet. Okay, and again, I like to have that /. Hit save. Rip Notepad, yeah. Notepad has been so good to me, I just abused it. Okay. All right, so actually, let's try it here. Maybe Postman will be able to handle it. I really want to show you that's all in one line. Click away. There we go. Postman, don't fail me. Send. There it is, finally. You see, the left side tells you the line numbers. It's just one. It's wrapped because this doesn't go on forever, you know, but it's only on one line. Okay, it just wraps it, you know, compresses it so it doesn't go off the screen. But this is just one line. Okay, all of this is in one line. It's a very long line. Okay, all right, there's my proof for the day. All right, it really is one. Yep, told you, it's only one line. All right, so we put this here. Okay, cool. Now we have Tailwind. Now what do we do? Well, for now, let's just delete the styles. Again, this has nothing to do with the Tailwind. I'm just going to delete the styles. Just we have something fresh to work with here. The first thing you're going to notice is, what the heck? All the default styles are gone. Yes, that is the very first thing Tailwind does. Tailwind defaults all of the elements to default styles. Super default. Okay? So headers are no longer bold. They're no longer large. It's all gone. Okay? There is no padding. There is no margin. It's all reset. So they're all at the same style level. They're basically blank. Now, using Tailwind, we are going to add the styles. So I'm going to delete all this so we can start from scratch. Okay. Okay. Now let's say the heading 2 tags, I want to have a certain style. So let's say class. So again, this is all Tailwind, very specific. Okay. So what I need to do now is I want to have some IntelliSense. IntelliSense is basically where the editor is going to help you try and actually, it's not going to work because I don't have a Tailwind thing. So actually, that won't work here. Okay. So if you need a style guide with Tailwind, like a document, we can just go to Tailwind. So the website, Tailwind. Tailwind. There we go. Then we go to the documentation, and we can either search for something, or we can just look. So if I full screen this, I'll get this is what I want. So we go over here. You should really read this. If you want to become a pro at Tailwind, you should really read this. But then if you want to look at very specific things, we can go. So we want to look at, like, you know, spacing and padding. How do we do that? Sizing. That's an interesting question. Typography. How we do that? Text. Interesting. All different type of things. Backgrounds. Borders. Effects. Filters. So you can blur things. Tables. How you should work with table. Transitions for animations. Stuff like that. Even it has an area for SVGs. Okay, cool. So let's go to let's look at spacing. So spacing, the way that Tailwind works is it has a default spacing pattern. So all the spacing in Tailwind refers to a rem. So one, you know, if you say space any size of like 1, it means 0.25 rem. So it's a quarter rem, which is about 4 pixels. So every step up is just a quarter above. So 1 to 2 is adding a quarter, 2 to 3 is another quarter. So now we have 3 quarters. 3 to 4, that's a whole rem. But the pixels are going a step by 4, 4, 8, 12, 16. The base here is every 4 pixels. So every time you move from one to another, you just take the subtraction of these two. So the size, the tailwind size 24 minus 20 is 4 multiplied by 4. That's a difference of at least 16 pixels. So there's a 16 pixel difference here. So you can see how it works. Now colors work in a very similar fashion. So we have predefined gray colors, red, yellow, green. These are the colors that you're probably going to use the most. But not only that, the colors have variation in tones. So we have a 500, which is like probably the brightest, and then we can start getting a little darker, and then we can go a little bit lighter, right? So 500 is kind of like the middle. Things that are lower is brighter, right? So we can use this as like, let's say we had a button that was blue. The background was blue. When you click on it, we want to notify the user that they click on the button. So maybe we change the background from a 500 to a 700. But when they're hovering over some text, maybe it's a 300, right? To show that they're hovering. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to do that right now. So, so if we ever need to look at some styles, we'll just go here. So here, let's try and make some things like text. Well, let's just type in text. So there's text alignment. I don't want alignment. Font size. Here we go. So here's our font sizes. So the font sizes, they have a specific naming convention. So they start off with the smallest as XS. Now the reason why they're using labels instead of actual values is because they're saying that you will never really need a font smaller than 0.75 rem. It just doesn't make any sense, right? So why give you the ocean of options? Let's just limit you with these options so you stay consistent. Now, again, if you need a smaller size, you can override Tailwind, you can use styles, any whatever you want, and you can override them. But the point is to provide you with a fixed, like a small set of options so you stay consistent. But if you need something very, very specific, you can always override Tailwind. We can't do that now because we're using it as a CDN, but next week when we start using React, we were going to import Tailwind and we're going to be able to customize it, okay, using post CSS. All right, cool. So here's my CSS, okay, or here's my default HTML. I want to change the size of H2. So I'm going to say text extra large, so XL. Okay, boom, H2 got a little bit bigger. Okay, so let's say, that's too small. Let's say I want my subheadings to be 2XL. Okay, well, there you go. Okay, now I want them to be font. I want them to be bold. Now they're bold. Maybe bolder. Or is it boldest? Oh, no, I think it's strong. Dang. Hold on. So font weight, we have extra bold. Okay. So these are the font weights that we can use. Okay. So can I split this so we can have it like that? We can see at the top. Okay. So we have bold. We have extra bold. Extra bold. So there it is. And then we have just black. So it's like just a deep, which is the same size as extra bold. It's almost, you can't even tell. That's pretty cool, right? Now we can change these things. We can even change the colors now. We can say the text color will be a blue 500. So now it's a blue 500. Okay, you're like, oh, well, it should be at 100. Okay, there it is at 100. Okay. Now you say, well, what if I wanted to change the title text to be a specific color when we hover over it? Okay. Now there's a way you can do that. So let's try and do it the CSS way. So let's do that. So the way we can do this is by using something called pseudo classes. So the way we do this, we say on hover, we say H1, what is it, H2? So on H2, for example, if we hover, so all you have to do is append this colon and then the action. So on hover, I want to change the color to be, I don't know, gray. Okay. So all H2s, when I hover over them, they'll turn gray. See? Do you see that? And that's how easy that was. So they're turning gray. Okay. But here's the problem. I want to use this with Tailwind. Okay, so here I just say pseudo element variance. Okay. So there's a bunch of them. So let's scroll to the very top. Up, up, up. Or let's just type in something like hover. Let's say you want to do a hover in other states. Okay, here we go. So here's some examples that you can do. You can say hover me, and it shows you how to use it. So with CSS, or with Tailwind, okay, well, with CSS, you use the colon and then hover. Okay, you can attach this to a class. So for example, I call this dot hover hover gray. Okay, that's my class name, but I want to attach it a hover. So when any element that has the class hover dash gray and it's currently hovering, we can change the color to be gray, for example. Okay. Now notice the H2s are no longer have that hovering thing, but if I make it explicit by saying, okay, we now have the hover gray option, only the H2, this top one does it because I added it. But now let's say on my P tag class, I add that as well. So hover dash gray. Now when I hover over the P tag, it changes color when I hover. Now you can start thinking about, oh crap, I can do this for my buttons, right? And it makes sense that you do it for your buttons. Yes, absolutely. Now I can achieve that same effect using Tailwind by using the pseudo class here. So I'll say on hover, I want the text to go blue and let's say 400. See that? It's going lighter. But I'm also using the Tailwind. I'm doing this using Tailwind, right? So hover text blue. So I showed you that you could do it in CSS. So this is not black magic here, right? This is like you can do this totally using CSS. So there is no replacing the CSS. We're just using utilities to help us write our styles much faster. Okay. Boom, bada bing, bada boom. Cool. Okay. But what's really cool is I can attach this to anything I want. Okay. So let's style our buttons now. So I want my button to have a background color. So how do we do background colors in Tailwind? We can go over here, we type in background. Let's see, do we just do colors? BG color. So let's do colors instead. Maybe no, not gradients, just colors. Their search thing kind of blows. I want this one right here. Okay. So let's go to the backgrounds color. There we go. So this is why I say, yeah, Tailwind. If you need to override something, you should do that through Tailwind, not try and apply it to a style, because these colors, the gray 100s, they were generated using code. So code created the CSS code. So yeah, it's like meta code for code. So these actually get generated. Nobody typed this out by hand. They typed out the algorithms to build it, but they're like, no one did this by hand. I think when I show you the CSS, it's actually something like 180,000 lines of code, or like of CSS code. So nobody did that by hand. It all gets generated. But anyways, if you want to target the background colors, you still have access to all the colors like before, except we now, instead of saying text, we say BG. BG as in background. So now we have different colors here. Okay, cool, brilliant. So now I can say something like, okay, I want the background color to be blue 500. Okay, so there's the background color. Okay, and then I want the text to be white, right? Get that nice contrast. Oh, cool. Now let's do some padding. How can we add padding? This is what I love about Tailwind. So there's a couple ways you can do it. You could say P and then hyphen and give it a number. This is the spacing. Now again, the spacing is relative to their spacing that they talked about here. So talked about spacing. Really should do it from here. Spacing, padding. Here's padding. So again, so a P of 1 is a quarter rem, 0.25 rem. And then a P2 is a half a rem. So the step up is always a quarter of a rem. So the rem is actually going to scale based off the pixels of your display. So it's always going to scale. It scales properly with screen readers and the like. So there's a couple of ways you can do padding. Well, there's actually 3 ways. So if I say P2, for example, look at all that spacing. It does the spacing on the X, right? We call this the X axis and the Y axis. But what if I I think that's too much padding on the top. Let's add the padding, less padding on the top, but I want the same padding on the left and the right. So Tailwind, you can actually specify this by saying PX. So I say PX2. So I still have the same spacing on the left and the right, but I can say PY just 1. So just a slight padding. Okay, cool. That looks better, more rectangular. Now, this button is rounded. Okay, so I can call this is called a radius. So Ray can say radius none. Is it radius? Oh no, it's rounded none. So I can say rounded none. Okay, now you can see we have square edges. But I can say, so let's go again, going back to Tailwind. And here we can go to the, I think these are called effects. Or is it border radius? Yes, here we go, border radius. So we have rounded none, so there is no roundedness. Okay, and you have rounded small, and then rounded. So you can think of rounded as how we had the text to be 1. You can think of rounded to be like your baseline. Okay, so if rounded is present, you're gonna get this much, and then here we start to scale a little bit. So you have medium, large, extra large, and then 2XL, blah 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 blah. And then rounded full is to make a complete like round pill. Okay. So here we have rounded none. If I say rounded, right there, you can see it's rounded. I can say rounded small. So it's still rounded, but it's a very hint. It's a hint. Or I can say rounded full, and it gives me a pill. Right? It's a pill shape. So I'm gonna keep that. I like that. Now, let's try and make the buttons to be uppercase. All I have to say is uppercase. There's a utility for uppercase. Done. Beautiful. Isn't that cool? We're styling all these things just using Tailwind. Now, when I hover over, I would like the button to change color. So I can say hover, colon, and then what do you want to do? Well, on the hover, I want to change the background, not background, the BG color. So BG blue, something lighter, like 300. So now when I hover over, well, maybe that's too light. We go from 500 to 400. Okay, it's very slight. See that? It's very slight. There you go. Is this all making sense? Anybody have any questions? This is pretty cool, right? All these utilities are just built for us. It's pretty nice. All right, so what else can we do? Well, let's say when we hover, just for the sake of, we can also attach another one. So when we hover, I also want to change the text to be black, right? So you can actually do multiple things. You can chain them. That's cool. Okay, I won't do that because it doesn't look good. Okay. Right? Lots of potential, yeah. Lots of potential. So look how this is looking. This looks not half bad. Just this button here looks pretty good. Pretty good, pretty good. Now I'm going to show you a trick that you can do with VS Code. So I'm going to delete all of this. Here's a cool trick. Now you'll notice I had to do the styles all for one button, right? Okay, but I have two buttons. I want to style these at the exact same time. So how do we do this? So let me click here. I have the class, or here, let me show you some really cool stuff. Let me start from the very beginning. Okay. So if I click on a tag, let's say button, and I hit Control D, it highlights them. If I hit it again, it's going to take me to the edge of the other one. If I hit it again and again, then I get that. Now, notice I have multi-cursors. I have multiple cursors. But that's not what I want, right? I want to go from here to here. So how do I do that? Well, I can hold Alt and then click. Okay, so I'm gonna click over here. I'm gonna click the button. I want to put my cursor right here. I'm gonna hold Alt. I want my cursor to now go here. Now I have two cursors. Notice I have two cursors. Now I can do twice the amount of code. So I can say class. I can say, all right, I want the background to be blue, 500, hit save, boom. I want the text to be white, hit save. They're both happening at the same time. PX2, save, boom. PY1, save, boom. I want them both to be uppercase, boom. When I hover, I want the background to become a blue 400. Okay, we hover over, boom, boom, at the same time. And I want it to be rounded full. I want it to have look like a pill. There you go. Multi-cursors. Has nothing to do with Tailwind, has nothing to do with HTML. It's just something you can do with VS Code, right? So that should increase your productivity, the fact that you can have multiple cursors. Okay? Cool. So I want you guys to play around with it. Just this very basic stuff like the hovering and stuff. We're going to be doing way more complicated stuff later. But, you know, play around with the Tailwind. Again, you can link it like this. Okay, using the Tailwind instructions. Okay, and again, to find this, you just go to the Tailwind website. So we go to tailwind.css.com or tailwindcss.com. Go to Get Started, Installation. On the side, go to it says Using Tailwind via CDN, or just scroll all the way till you see that. I would just, you know, click on Using Tailwind via CDN, and then copy this, copy it, and then go to your HTML code, your HTML, and then just paste it, and you're done. Can we make our own style sheet with our own classes that use Tailwind? Absolutely, you can. Yes. Okay. Cool. So does anybody have any other questions? We're kind of running out of time here. So we'll end it here, and then on Monday we will pick up, but we're going to pick up using React. So React is going to be interesting. If you guys want to take a read ahead, I would say go to the React.js. It's like reactjs.org. Yes. If you guys want to start taking a looking at this, I would start reading. React is JavaScript, right? We're writing our UI using JavaScript, okay? So we kind of already know JavaScript a little bit, like the stuff that I've been showing you guys, but we're going to learn a lot more. There's a lot of advanced things that you need to learn about JavaScript, but I'm going to introduce those concepts once we touch React, which is next week. So if you were here for the JavaScript stuff, you thought, oh, this is pretty easy and stuff like that, I'm going to blow your mind on the stuff that I'm going to show you when we start next week. And the reason why I'm kind of waiting is because, there's actually not a whole lot to React. Once I show you the basics of React, it's basically that's it. The hardest part is optimizing, getting good React, writing good React code, applying design patterns to React, like MVVM or MVC or MVP. How do you apply those to React? And that's going to take understanding the knowledge of those patterns and then applying it to how React works. React is a functional style of approach, okay? And we're going to see what that means, and also how do we take a component approach to writing our UI, because as you can kind of see here, it's component based. It's component based, but uses functions. That's kind of different. And how can we take care of state? Taking care of state in just vanilla JavaScript is kind of tedious, but using React, they kind of take care of that for us. So there's certain things that React does for you, and I love it for that. But make no mistake, React is not a framework, unlike Angular or some other stuff. React is a library. It's not a framework. And we're going to talk more about what that means next week. So if you want to research a little bit about React library versus framework, go for it. Just some stuff that you can meld over in your brain a little bit. And starting next week, we're going to ramp up building stuff. We're going to start building a lot of stuff using React. And again, I don't really have to talk about JavaScript because if you've been following the series since the beginning, you kind of already know a little bit about JavaScript. So some of the basic stuff, I'm going to talk about it, but we're going to start ramping things up because I want to focus on the advanced parts of JavaScript. Those are so specifically, I'm going to target concepts of JavaScript that I can guarantee you're going to be asked in an interview, and also some quirks about JavaScript that you should probably know about. Okay. So yeah, I'll see you guys on Monday. Have a good weekend. Play with the Tailwind because we're going to be using it more and more. Okay. So you have a lot of homework to do. Read more on Tailwind. Oh, I know the perfect place to send you off for the Tailwind stuff. So for the Tailwind stuff, we want to say his name is Adam Wathan. He is the creator of Tailwind. This guy, brilliant man. I would go here and I think it's this one. Design yes. Okay. You can skip the first one because I'm going to go over that. I guess you can watch it from the very beginning. But come to his channel and watch his playlist for designing with Tailwind CSS. And then here he builds like a very simple application called Workation. And he basically just goes over. I think this is what he had streamed. And then when it says right here, building with Tailwind, he basically builds it, but these videos are more refined and they're in smaller bites. Okay. So I will link his channel in here because there's just a lot of things that needs to be learned about Tailwind. And he streams every so often. He streams on YouTube and I think just YouTube. And he goes over some like really complicated stuff, like how would you solve doing a UI that looks like X? And then he basically just shows you how you can accomplish that using Tailwind. or some new advanced features or some things that probably people didn't know about Tailwind, and he goes over that. So it's really, really cool. So I would follow this, go to the playlist, and watch the Designing with Tailwind CSS. Again, we're going to go over it, but if you want to start familiarizing yourself a little bit more, by all means, that's a great place to start. Okay, cool. Again, next week is React. So get ready for that. And yeah, cool. So hopefully everybody signed in as well. I pinned the message on the chat, so please sign in. And with that, I will call it a day and see you guys on Monday. Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.